Support for U.S. national defense alternates between what has been described as peaks of fear and valleys of apathy. When conflict seems imminent, Congress and the public are willing to foot the bill to feel secure. However, once a threat has been defeated, Americans pull back, anxious to spend money on other wants and needs. We forget what it takes to fight and win a war, and the length of time it takes to build military forces. And we sometimes take for granted the military superiority that, time and time again, has kept us safe. Choosing to believe that each war will be the last. History tells a different story. Since World War II, the U.S. is engaged in a major war about every 15 years. This should tell us that preparedness is an important investment. But we don't learn from history. At least we don't seem to. Today, rather than preparing for future threats, the U.S. is largely resting on the investments of previous generations. And not only that, we have imposed damaging, arbitrary caps on defense spending that has resulted in a force today that is older, smaller, and increasingly ill-equipped to meet growing threats. Our force today largely consists of equipment initially acquired during the Reagan buildup. Not surprisingly, many of these systems have already reached or exceeded their life expectancies. As these fleets continue to age, they become increasingly difficult and costly to repair and maintain, leading to even fewer pieces of equipment available for training and for contingencies. Although new equipment is coming online, it isn't being purchased fast enough to offset the retirement of legacy items. For example, in 1989, the U.S. had 137 submarines and 239 ships in its principal surface fleet, 2,852 total Air Force fighter and attack aircraft, and 15,600 tanks. Today, we only have 69 submarines and 115 ships in our principal surface fleet, less than 1,300 Air Force fighter and attack aircraft, and only 2,384 tanks, a force roughly half the size America had at the end of the Cold War. As the size of the force has dwindled, so has the manufacturing and industrial base, critical to keeping the military strong. Not too many years ago, the Navy operated 13 shipyards, critical to the construction, maintenance, and repairs of naval vessels and support for a naval presence around the world. Now, there are just 4. Similar declines have occurred among companies making airplanes and military vehicles. The consequence? The smallest force since World War II, and limited ability to expand it should the need arise. And while we have introduced new capabilities since that time, our pace of modernization has been too slow to maintain the same advantage we previously enjoyed for many generations. Meanwhile, U.S. adversaries have been taking advantage of our complacency, ramping up defense spending while we have allowed our force to decay. Though our service members remain the best trained in the world, U.S. military superiority is no longer assured. Correcting this problem requires the ability to bring new equipment into the force on a more consistent basis so that forces can train and can operate equipment that is relevant to the modern era. Additionally, as warfare adds cyber and space to the historically lethal domains of land, sea, and air, the military must forecast how these will change war and adjust accordingly. This requires continuous investment, experimentation, and testing of new equipment and technologies. And this takes time, measured in years or even decades. Comparing where we are with what history tells us where we need to be reveals risk. Risk to our safety, our interests, and the future of our country. We're not ready, and we need to be.